these exercises, right, we do need to know why we're doing it so it can drive how we're doing it. The why is we want our kids to be able to to hear the sounds, manipulate the sounds. And we know now from the research that phonemic manipulation, being able to, we know we need to isolate, blend, and segment, but also being able to delete and substitute, that level of manipulation, all of that helps improve reading. So everyone can learn to improve. It was something like 95% of people can improve wherever they are. They can improve. And of those that are improving, almost 100% of them transfer to improved reading. So it's not just something like, oh yeah, I've got that skill that I can now do better. That skill transfers to improved reading. So phonemic manipulation improves reading. So that's the why we do it. And that drives, that's the priority, right, to improve reading. So any student that is deficient in phonemic awareness and manipulation, we work to improve that, and it improves reading. So when we scaffold, we're always trying to find the right level of scaffolding, but the goal is to hit the phonemic processing. And when we talk about phonemic processing, it's like eyes shut in the dark. You can do it with just the sound, because the sound processing part of the brain actually runs a little bit slower than the visual part. And, with my weak left knee metaphor, if I'm always using my right leg to support my left isn't getting that much of a workout. So eventually you want to get where you're just exercising the weakest part, which is that phonemic processing. So the goal is to do it without any scaffolding, just by working with sounds. Say sneeze. Everyone say sneeze. Instead of the n, say k. Geez, right? Okay, you can't see it. You can't read it because it's not spelled the same. We're trying to just target that sound, the part of your brain that puts the sounds together. So the goal is purely an auditory exercise of processing sounds. Often our kids can't get there, so we have to scaffold. So I started at the least amount of scaffolding, and I talked about using our fingers, like, when we say cat, at, cat. So just something as simple as this. This is the lowest level of scaffolding that, the least scaffolding. And some kids can do it with just this type of scaffolding. So if I say k, at, change the k to a p, the kids can like, okay, cat, and just having that, so their brain is able to say, oh yeah, it was this sound, I'm going to change this sound. So that type of scaffolding might be all that's necessary for some kids. Or if you're working with your compound words and you say dog, house, right? And now take away dog, what's left, and it's house. Sometimes just, using your hands is what they need, and then they get it. And then we backed up and said, okay, but what happens when we have kids that are like, they're really lost? What were some of the steps? Who recalls from yesterday? Some of the steps that we used for scaffolding from the very lowest level students. Bernie, do you remember what we did? Or go ahead.
No, so you use picture objects, real objects to this one, and then one went away, what's left?
Right, thank you. Yeah, so we want to make sure that the terminology we use is meaningful to the students. Because if students don't get, take this one away, what's left, how are they going to do our exercises? Or if I say, don't say this instead, It's like, you know, they're not processing the instructions. They can't do this, the task. So we talked about using concrete objects, right? And the Jamboard. I'll do it very quickly. If I have it up. We used a Jamboard, and we started out with concrete objects where I held two concrete objects. And we talked about identifying first, asking the students to distinguish, asking the students to produce the words, and then demonstrating taking away. So identify first. This is a pen. These are glasses. And then you ask the students to distinguish which one's the pen and have them pointed. Which one's the object, or which one's the glasses, have them point. And then, oh wait, what was this one called? Have them produce. What was this one called? Have them produce the word. Now I say, okay, watch. I can play a trick on you. I'm taking one away. Tell me what's left. So we can, using very concrete objects, demonstrate the concept that we're working on. Okay, I'm taking one away. What's left? Glasses. Okay. And we might even do that with substitution. Where's my phone? Okay. Okay. So I did this. Now watch this. I'm going to do a trick. I put in something else. Now what do I have? And have them substitute, right? So I've taken away the pen and I've put in a phone. So giving them concrete examples of the exercise. And then the Jamboard we looked at used from concrete using to pictorial representation of concrete objects. So type jam. So, you know, jams are very difficult to find in your drive. You put in type : jam to get a to get your search. Okay, and so let me just show you again, just very quickly, this review of yesterday. So are you seeing this? So from actual concrete objects, we use pictorial representations of the objects, right? So this is a cup and this is a cake, right? Point to the cup, point to the cake. What was this one called? What's that called? And then I can take it away and what's left. So I can demonstrate what we're trying to accomplish by deletion, by using objects that they know. So we know these things. And eventually we went from physical representation, so we had a foot and a ball, and I take the ball away, what's left, but getting them to, we identify, they indicate, they produce the words, and then we can do a deletion. And then from physical or pictorial representations of physical objects, we went to Elkonen boxes where we say, oh, I didn't have the picture. This is my son. This is a set. This one's son. This one's set. Which one's this? And then if I take away the son, what's left? Right? So we can use, but just going to the abstract of, say, sunset, and now say it without sun. It's like some of our kids, our low babies and our young ones, they have no idea what you're trying to accomplish. Can't do it. The whole wording that we're using is outside of their comprehension. So we have to make the concept of what we're trying to accomplish clear. So it's like, okay, we've already looked at pictures. Now I can say, I don't have a picture. This one is sun and this one is set. And that level of scaffolding helps. And we can do that whether it's with compound words We can do that eventually with syllables, and we can do that with phonemes. So, and this Jamboard I shared with you yesterday, right? And we worked also with using a Jamboard, a different Jamboard, for working with visual representation, a higher level of scaffoldings that some students require some students require the visual support of letters in order to do the manipulation. But remember, the goal is to get it so it's purely sound. And so while we can use the support, the visual support of the letters, we do want to get to where we can practice without the letters. So if your students know a few letters, oh, sorry, went too far. If your students do know a few letters, okay, like this student, these are the letters this student is familiar with. And if I only had, yeah, I'm just being very slow today. If I only had a few letters, I might only put a few letters up on my board, and then we were going to manipulate. So if I had, this is very frustrating. If I had, if I just know a couple of letters here, and the student needs the support, we talked about using this is and 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 what would happen if I change I'm going to change the to a, what do I have here that works? To a g. I know I have g. Anyway, so we can use few letters if that's what the student needs in order to scaffold the processing of manipulating sounds.
Emily, so Mel and I use a Jamboard, but I notice you have which I think is good, the vowels different color than the consonants. We're only like on 5 or 6 letters. So right now we've only did the A, but we've done every letter a different color. Should we switch it to do like one color as the consonant and one color as the vowel? We don't have all of them, literally 5 letters only. Switch it.
So I like to represent for my beginning students vowels separately because vowels are so important, right? I teach that the vowels are the breath in the word. So we need to have it. And they're the ones that give the students the most trouble.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
I have, for my beginning students, I keep vowels a separate color.
We will change the million of Jamboards we have.
They're easy to change, except when they're running as slow as they are today. So we talked about using this for phonemic manipulation. And that for the student that I was talking about yesterday, she can't just change sounds yet. So she actually says, okay, right now I have gap and I want to change it to rap. I say we have gap and I want to change it to rap. She can't say this is the one that changes. She's not there yet. So she'll say g, gap, and okay, what are we trying to change it to? So she'll listen to the words. Okay, don't need that one. And bring it down and then say, oh, okay. Oh, then she can find this. So she's not able to do it in one processing step. She has to take a couple of steps to do it. But she's getting there, and it's getting better because she couldn't do that at all originally. So whatever scaffolding you need, you provide the scaffolding as long as you need it. Remembering the goal. The goal is for a student to be able to manipulate sounds in just working with the sounds. Now, for your kinders, they're also learning the words, the phonics. So they're learning the sounds that the letters represent. So using this supports both. That's where they are. Support both at the same time. Go for it. It helps. Rather than say, okay, now we're doing phonics and now we're doing manipulation. Doing that type of exercise on a Jamboard helps both. So kill two birds with one stone, but eventually you want to get your students to be able to hear it with just the sounds. So you're reading a story and you're reading Hungry Fox and the Foxy Duck, and you say fox, fox. Oh, what are the sounds in fox? Ox. Let me think. If I change my f to a b, ox, box. Okay, that took 3 seconds, and in the midst of doing your story. So however you can support that phonemic awareness and manipulation throughout the day, throughout whatever you're doing, great. You don't have to just have it as we now have phonemic awareness time, and then we have phonics time, and then we have reading comp time. When you combine things, it supports each other throughout the day, right? So we use Jamboard. Today I want to just show you using Google Slides. So if you're in whole class and your students, and you're going to get this, in fact, I'm going to share this. Oh, so what I've done is I've put a bunch of the resources in OneDrive, and I've made it so anyone with the link has access to all the resources. So as I continue to put resources into the drive, you'll have access to all of it. So the drive link is, I will give you the link to it right now. Okay, get the link. So the link is going to this drive, is going into chat, and I'm putting more resources in. So, oh, sorry, that was not the right one. That's also useful, but that was not the right one. All right, edit. So with the files in this drive, if you would, open it up, make a copy for yourself so that you have your own copy. Okay, so we have, this is going very slowly today. Okay, we have this. So I have this. This is a Google slide presentation, and for whole group, so if it's larger than 5 kids, I like using Google Slides. And I'm going to share this link with you right now, and you get to be my students. Anyone with the link has this no sign. Right, I need the link. The link. This is very slow. So what I like about Google Slides is everyone can work on their computer. I can see all of it. So if I have larger than a group of 5, which I can work with on a jam, Google Slides allows me to see many students in real time. Oh my goodness. It's not working today. And I've heard that Google is having issues this week. I will just show you. I will just show you. So what I do down here, if you can see this in the grid view, or up here in the grid view, I hit grid view, and I can see all the grids, all my students. So if I say, so-and-so, you're going to number 2, and so you're on 3, and so you're on 4, then I can watch my students do the work, whether I'm using letters or if I'm using my colored tiles as Elkanon boxes, I can see them do the manipulation. So by working in grid view, I see all of it. I see it happen in real time, and I can see them. The thing I don't like about using Google Slides is, you know, when the kids grab a corner instead of the center and then they stretch it out. So the first thing you teach them is Control Z, right, to undo it. But and then you teach them touch right in the center, and then move it. And on iPads, you say tap it first and then move it, and then tap away from it. And that seems to help. So they're not stretching it out and doing crazy things. Anyway, so this is not going to work, but this is one other way I use for a whole group or larger groups to check on and work with phonemic manipulation if I'm just using the sounds, or even in spelling and building words using the letter tiles. So I can have the group, okay, we're building the word stamp, what are the sounds you hear? And they pull their letters and make it, and I can watch it happen. Okay, so that's not going to work today. We'll see. I might come back
Emily,
to it.
what do you like about Google Slides versus using the Jamboard for them to manipulate? Is there anyone you prefer?
I like Jam for 5 students or less.
Oh, that's what you
because
said.
when I expand it, I can see 5. And yes, they can stretch things. Yes, they can delete it. Yes, they can mess it up. But it's pretty quick. It's pretty quick. I find the littles have a hard time manipulating they tend to like misshape the blocks or the letters. And moving letters into place is a little laggy. Like they see the outline of the box move. And then after they take their finger off, then the box has gone there. But it's a little laggy for the littles. For the older kids, I like the Google Slides because older kids tend to be naughtier and they realize that they can delete everything on your Google Jam and you can't undo it. And Google Jam does not have a version history like Google Slides does. In Google Slides, I can say, let me show you who did what. Because you can go through and you can see who did what thing in the slide deck, right? So for the older kids, I like the Google Slides, and the littler ones, I like the Jam because it's less laggy.
Thank you.
Yeah, but for whole group, I can't see 9 kids on Jamboard. And for some reason on Jamboard, you get more people, it gets laggier and laggier. It's like I mean, I know they say you can have as many as 50, but it seems like you have more than 9, and processing every touch point that's happening is too much, and so the whole thing slows down. Whereas for some reason, segmenting it by slides it handles more touches at the same time usually, but today it's not happening at all. So I don't know. Okay. So that's phonemic awareness and manipulation, and the importance of it is that we know that when we address those skills, we improve reading. Next steps. And we also talked the Kilpatrick's past test, and then I also gave the link to the Hegarty, Heggerty, Dr. Michael Hegarty, His curriculum is very well suited for pre-K through about first grade. He has a whole year's worth of everyday scripted activities you can do. It's like $80 for a book that you reuse year after year after year after year. And they have videos on, you know, using this type of hand signal and doing this. And so they're very scripted, and it's easy to do with whole group for the whole year. And they also have assessments.
Is that in the link that you put in the chat? Is that in that PDF resources?
It is. It's in there somewhere.
Okay.
I'll try to make it more the pieces are. It's in there. I have my Google slide presentation from the other day that links to a Wakelet. I'm putting it all into a Google site. I'm building a Google site that has all the resources delineated. But it takes me a while to do Google sites. Haley knows I have a hard time. Like, it never looks the way I want it to look. Why can't I get it to look the way I want? But I'm putting it all in there, so we will have it soon. Okay. So we talked about assessing, instructing in it, scaffolding, phonemic manipulation. We talked yesterday about vowels, and vowels being the breath. And we talked about feeling that. So we are able to eventually segment words, and then eventually we can decode words by the segmentation. Okay, today, just to go back into some other preliminaries. In the virtual world, it is really hard to work on handwriting. I know that. But it is an area that there's more research that shows that when students learn proper letter formation and correct pencil grip, it aids reading. Because as we talked about yesterday, the metaphor of a 4-burner stove, the things that you're having to pay attention to, you put up in the front. You put your stews and your soups on the back, right? And you kind of let it sit there and simmer. The more that we're having to think about, the more that we're having to concentrate. So if I have so many things that need my immediate attention, something's going to get burned, right? Something's not going to work out. So when we have to put so much attention into every little thing, everything suffers. So the more that we can get everything automatic, the better. Letter formation is one thing that we know that it supports the sound to the symbol. And we know that improving letter formation, connecting it to the sound, improves reading. So at your pre-K, K, first grade level, when you can teach correct letter formation, you will have an easier time with reading and spelling, because that becomes more automatic. It connects to the sound, and it puts everything together easier. The part that we get more not as sure on is, you know, if you've got a 5th grader and he's writing his letter incorrectly, is it worthwhile correcting it? If he's reading and spelling okay, maybe it's not, you know, so that's kind of the gray area. So, but we know definitely in the foundational years, teaching correct letter formation makes it easier for a student to write, and it improves reading. So we do it. So just as a demonstration, the correct pencil grip is called a tripod grip. So the correct pencil grip uses 3 fingers, tri meaning 3, surrounding the pencil, and not at the part where it gets smaller, but a little further back. Okay. For kinders and little ones, it's appropriate to use all fingers together because these other three can support this. So that's still appropriate at the kinder level. Eventually, you want to get a tripod and you have the student place these two fingers up against their palm. The palm can then rest on the paper, supporting the hand, and the line between your thumb down your carpal tunnel here stays fairly straight. What we don't want to see is this, so that you've got this hook between your thumb to your wrist. So the OT people say that strains the hand and is not helpful. The more tired you become in writing, the less you want to write, the more shortcuts you take, the more onerous it is. You know, it makes everything difficult. So by maintaining the tripod grip, fingers supported against your palm, and as straight a line as possible through thumb, carpal to wrist, the more relaxed your hand can be. And I tell people, okay, how heavy is this? You know, is it very heavy? It's not very heavy. I should be able to, as you're holding it, I should be able to just come and slide it right out of your hand. When you see your kids bending their fingers in like that much tension, they're going to tire out. We know that. They tire out, they stop writing. They pick the shorter words. It's tiring. They hate it. It hurts. Right? So the more we can release tension and provide automaticity, the better. So in a virtual world, it's really hard to see this. In a classroom, the easiest way looking over the classroom is as you're seeing kids writing, I always look for the direction that their pencil's pointing in. If it looks like the pencil's pointing over their writing shoulder, they're probably holding it pretty correctly. If you see the pencil at a different angle, you know they're not holding it correctly. So that's just a quick way of looking out over a classroom that you can see what's going on. Look for the direction of their pencil. And if we ever get to walk around students again, it's nice to see that the grip is relaxed, that this is not pinching down, right? We want to see a relaxed grip. Okay. So virtual world, it's tough. I don't know. Every once in a while, I'll say, show me your hand. Show me your hand. Of course, then they fix it, but it's like, okay, at least it brought back to recognition. Oh yeah, that's right. I have to fix it. But this is one area where it's just really hard. But certainly, and I've seen kids hold their pencils like this. I've seen the craziest things. Okay, that is appropriate at 3 years old. That's an appropriate grip for a 3-year-old, right? We want to eventually, by at kinder level, we would like to see them with the proper grip, whether they're supporting with all the 4 fingers here, or if they're able to get it so it's thumb and 2 fingers, the others resting. And what I know some OTs do is they take either a cotton ball or a Post-it, and they put the Post-it here, and I can't find my Post-its. I have a little Post-it, and they say, hold it, touch the Post-it, as they're training the students to put their fingers here. So eventually we want to get there, and when we can correct, the research shows that proper letter formation, proper pencil grip aids in reading. Well, proper pencil grip aids in proper letter formation and makes it easier to do everything. Proper letter formation aids in reading. Yes.
What about lefties?
Lefties, same thing happens, although lefties, the paper is angled a different way. And there is a difference on, should we allow them to crook their hand? Because lefties tend to hook as they write. And the OTs will still say that strains here, so you want to not do that. But it takes a different, the way that the paper is placed on it. And for for right-handed people, we always do that. Mirroring you, it would be left to right, right? So we always want to encourage that left to right. So even when they cross their T, left to right. For lefties, I've heard some people say lefties, let them cross right to left because it's less strain on the paper, less chance that they're going to dig into the paper and tear it. But, for our littles, I've heard that said, but I think, if we can teach them left to right, even in crossing their T's, whatever we can do to support that directionality of writing and reading is helpful. So if you're finding your lefty is tearing their paper by going, or they, whatever, then we might have to look at it. So, but directionality is important to teach and model. So the writing should encourage that. We know that explicit instruction makes things easier. So what I'd like to do is go through very explicit instructions just one time on all the letters and explain why some of that is important for the various letters. Okay? And I know there are other I have to reshare. I know that there are other methods, different curriculum have different strokes for letter formation. I would like to show you what I've been using to help support not just the letter formation, but associating the sound with the letter, phoneme to grapheme. Ready? So I'm just going to go in order and we'll talk about it. The things I will identify are the baseline at midline, and on primary paper it has the dots. For older kids, I say, you know what, it's invisible. It's still there. Can you see where it is? Do you have your secret eyes that can see that invisible line? And then the line above. Okay. For any letter that starts with a circle, we start, come on. Any letter that starts with a circle, I start by drawing a clock. And in fact, is the next slide the clock? Yeah, okay, so anyway, I have one slide. I pulled up the wrong slide that has a clock on it. Okay, so whether I start with a big clock here, and it's like, okay, here we go. Here's our clock. Look at it. And 3 o'clock's when you are home and you're having your snack. That's such an important time. It's right here. And this is about 2 o'clock there. So any circle letters, and I would, bring out a real clock and we identify where the 2 is. Circle letters, we start at 2 o'clock, we go up and around and back to our 2 o'clock. We don't start at the 12 o'clock. And the reason we don't start at the 12 o'clock is you'll see kids who'll do this when they make an A, right? So if you start at your 2 o'clock up and around, and then you can just drop it. So clock letters, we start, any of the round ones, we start at the 2 o'clock position so we don't have the girl with the ponytail effect. Okay. So once I've introduced that, I'm just going to run through them very quickly. The letter A, and I associate it with the sounds, whether you're teaching the sounds of being just A to begin with, or if you're teaching all the sounds A, ah, K to 2, or K to, maybe 2 or 3 on up, it'd be A, ah, But 2 o'clock up to the midline, down to the baseline, back to my 2 o'clock, and drop it like a rock. And I say drop it like a rock because you'll see kids who'll do this. Is that the way a rock drops? Does your rock fall like that? We want it to drop straight down, 2 o'clock, up and around, drop it like a rock. And manuscript in this form corresponds to cursive. If we get to teach cursive, a lot easier, because once you anchor it in cursive, then you then have a connector to the next letter. But just drop it like a rock helps to anchor it, so you're not doing these things. And it's like, okay, was that an O? Was that an A? I have no idea. Right. So 2 o'clock, up and around, drop it like a rock. Okay. What I say again and again and again is any letter that begins with the line starts very close to the letter in front of it, or very close to my red line, my beginning. So if I had my a here, and I want to instruct, I don't know what sequence you have, but we're just going to run through all of them. A letter that begins with the line starts very close to the letter in front of it. So my letter B, the sound is B. I drop it very close. If the line is that close, there's only one direction my circle can go. It can't go the other way. You can't get mixed up. So B, and I connect this to the sound in my mouth, right? The letter is B, the sound is B. Do you see that I made a line with my mouth? B. So drop it very close to the letter in front of it, come up and make the belly. And the sound is B. The letter C, and this is not the order that I teach letters, and you know what your curriculum has, you teach the orders in, but just going through it all. C is a clock. It starts at my 2 o'clock, up to the midline, down to my baseline, and up a little bit. And the sounds are k, s. Letter D. Look at my mouth as I say D. The sound is D. Do you see that my lips are open? I start with the open part, starting at 2 o'clock, up to the midline, down to the baseline, back to 2 o'clock, up tall, drop it like a rock. The sound is D. And if we encourage that their mouths are open as they say D, and they start at the open part, they will write it correctly. As they go to read, if they're, we're teaching directionality here, if they come to the letter, it has a line, it's the B. If they come to the letter and it has the circle, make your mouth a circle and say D. That makes sense? We okay? Any questions so far? The letter E. E begins with a line. Letters that begin with a line start very close to the letter in front. And I tell kids, it's the most common letter in the whole English language. If you can write your E's beautifully, your whole paper looks beautiful. We see people get very sloppy with the E's, the whole paper gets sloppy. So E's, starting, remember my clock? I'm going to just draw it right in half. So starting with a line very close to the letter in front of it, I draw a very flat line, and I want to see it's a very flat line. And then I go up and around and leave it open a little bit. And when you see this, as teachers, it makes the whole paper hard to read. Kids don't like it when their papers look messy. They just know it doesn't look good, and they don't feel good about themselves. When they see that their papers look nice, the confidence it builds is amazing. Just correcting that one letter can make the biggest difference. Okay. The reason I teach that very flat line up and around is to distinguish the sounds, as we talked about yesterday. The vowel sound ah, our mouth is very wide open, ah, and very wide this way, ah. Eh, and I use a 2-finger indicator, ah. It's like your mouth, your lips are 2 fingers apart, ah. But it's only halfway, so 1 finger, just like the letter is, see how I've cut my circle in half? Because a lot of our kids have issue with distinguishing the from the so connecting it to what's happening in their mouth and the letter formation puts all that information together in the brain. Okay, sounds are E. Okay, Letter F, it starts with the curvy part above the line, going up a little bit and then straight down and cross it in the direction in which we write. I do not have my kids cross on the midline because when they cross on the midline, it bumps into the lowercase, the other letters next to it, and gets messy, right? So if I have them cross slightly above the midline, it looks neater. It's not running into the other letters. G starts with a circle, and look at my mouth. G or J, both sounds, your lips are open because there's the printed G can get, not the printed G that looks like this. I don't even know how it's printed. That one, but some of the fonts where the G looks like this, and it's like, is that a G or a Q? And in any case, or is it a P? You know, the begins with a line, but the G, your lips are open. Oops, I lost everything. That's right. Okay, so G, starting at your 2 o'clock, up to the midline, down to the baseline, back to my 2 o'clock, drop it, and a shallow tail. I want my fish hook just below the surface of the water so it's not hitting the writing on the row below it. H starts with a line. Oh, sorry, the sounds of the G are G, J. H starts with a line, start it close. And then I say trace it up till you almost hit the midline, and then scoot across and drop it again. And what we don't want to see is this, right? So it's like, oh, did you trace it up? Do you see that opening there? So trace it up till you almost hit that midline, could then go across and drop it down. I, the sound is I, the sounds are I, drop it, dot. J, the sound is J, drop it, shallow tail, dot. K, starts with a line, drop it down. Then I say, pick up your pencil, put it on your midline, angle in, angle down. And the concept of midway or middle, some of our 5-year-olds don't have that concept yet. So if they don't have that concept, you have to scaffold, either by putting the dot on, so you're going to aim for this point here, and aim for that point. So here, start here, aim for that point and go down. I know some people teach it where you put your pencil and go up and then go down again, but I do it in the 2 strokes and not 3. L, M. So what I see is when we talk about confusing letters, M is often confused with W, especially since some of the fonts have the W like that, right? So here's what I say. My lips are closed. So I'm going to start at my midline, drop it down. Now close your lips, trace it up, go across and drop it, and trace it up. Do you see how your lips are closed right here? These are your lips, and see how closed they are? Really closed. Because the confusing letter here, your lips are open. Whoa. So are your lips closed or are your lips open? So that tracing up helps to show that your lips are closed. Besides which, I say that the letter M is like Mrs. Laidlaw. I'd like to be thinner. I really would. So it's like, can you help the M for Mrs. Laidlaw be a little bit thinner? Because, there'll be kids who'll do this, right? I say, oh, that's lovely, but that's for Mrs. Laidlaw. Mrs. Laidlaw would really like to be a little thinner. Could you help make that a little bit thinner for me? So some of our our 5-year-olds, if they can even just get it on the page, we're happy. We know that. But however we can support as we go on, it is worth doing. So the M sound, my lips are closed. I close the lips on that one. N, okay. Now here's the other confusing letter. N is confused with U. And yesterday we talked about symmetry and positioning, and that it's only in these squiggles that we call writing that the orientation matters, right? So for any other object, the orientation that you see it in doesn't matter. It functions the same way. This is still a pen. Yep, still a pen. Nope, hasn't changed, still a pen, no matter what orientation you see it in. But our writing system, the orientation matters. And that has to be taught. That has to be taught, and it has to be taught explicitly for a lot of kids. It's not a natural thing. The natural thing is that orientation doesn't matter. Saying orientation completely changes it. This is new. So, like with the B and the D and the P, exact same formation, just orientation change, right? And so we connect it to what's happening in our mouth. So for this one, the N and the U are exactly the same. It's just an orientation difference. So for the N, and the U, I say, this is my tongue. See my tongue? I'm showing you my tongue. Now watch when I say, can you see, where's my tongue? Do you see it up at the top of my mouth, behind my teeth? This letter, the tongue is pointing up. This letter, my tongue's pointing down. Feel it, and as you say it with me. Can you feel your tongue lying down in your mouth? That makes sense? So, and for students who have difficulty, I will play a game with them, and I will say, okay, watch me. I'm going to make a letter. You tell me which one it is. Okay, everyone, if you would unmute for a second so you can hear. So I'm going to show you my mouth, and you're going to tell me which sound I'm making. Ready? The sound is, what sound was that?
N.
That's a letter name. What's the sound? Right, okay. So connecting it with the sound is easier because the letter names don't always correspond. N doesn't begin with the N sound. It ends with the N sound, right? So the sound is N. Okay, ready? Watch this one. What's the sound? Right? Okay, now if I were doing these two, okay, watch me. Tell me which one I'm making. What sound was that? Okay, watch this one. What sound was that? Right? So if they can see it in me, then I ask them to produce it, right? Show me the sound with your tongue up. So if we're working on these again, show me the sound with your tongue up. I want your tongue up. What's the sound? Say it. Good. Now tell me the sound with your tongue down. So then they can produce it. And then on these, we do the same thing. Tell me the sound with your lips that start with the line. What's that sound? Tell me the sound with that your lips start open. Right? So I know there are schools of thought that say, don't teach the confusing letters together. Never show a word with B if you're teaching B. Never, ever, ever combine the two. So they're absolutely solid with one, then you do the other. But you can't do that in school, I'm going to tell you, because there's always going to be a Ben and a David in the same class the second you do that. You do that, because kids will always have to deal with both. So if you're going to have to see both, make it clear what's happening. to distinguish the two. Okay, back to letter formation. So, tongue up. So I'm going to start at my midline, but then I make my tongue pointing up and I scoot across, drop it down. Oh, it's a circle one, starting at 2 o'clock, up to the midline, down to the baseline, back to my 2 o'clock, and I just stop there. The sounds are ah, o, oo. Ah, o, oo. Okay, next one, watch my mouth. I start with the line. Letters that begin with a line start very close to the letter in front, trace it up, make the belly sit on the line. For Q, and that's probably the last one you teach in your sequence, but I'm just going to show it here. The sound, the letter is called Q, the sound is Q, and it's a circle. Let's start with our circle. Drop it down, and I'm going to put a little flag on it. And I know it's printed without the flag, but for our kids learning to distinguish, I put a flag on it. And that the sharp flag helps them distinguish it from the curve of a G a little easier as they're writing to me. And then I'll always teach that Q always needs a U, so I'll just go ahead and write it here. Q always needs a U. They're best friends. They never go out. Q never goes out without his friend. Okay, the sound is this. Let me go back to the Q. The sound for the Q is the most. Q and X are very unusual in that it's two sounds welded together. So when we say Kw, we are actually hearing Kw. We're hearing two phonemes represented together, always represented together. And for orthographic mapping, I don't care if you put the two phonemes together on one line or if you separate it. So if we say quick and we're going to orthographically map quick, if you say k, w, I, k, and you do it like w, I, k, or if you say kw, I, k, and you put the QU together, there are some people say, oh no, they absolutely have to be apart because there are two phonemes, there are two sounds. And there are some people who say, let's just stick it together because the kids are always going to write it together. I don't care which one's right. The point is still sound to symbol in sequence. So I don't like to spend too much time in the arguments. I would prefer to spend more time in actually the instruction. So whichever way you're going to do it, if you want to separate as two sounds or put it together. So the Q, the QU represents two sounds. They're always together. The sound R, the letter R, as we mentioned yesterday, is the last sound that develops naturally in students as they're speaking. It is the most difficult to isolate. So, and starting at the midline, drop it down, trace it up, and put a hook. And as we say this sound, it is so difficult to say without any vowel component to it. And there are arguments, I read them all the time still on OG pages of instructors and blogs, and it's like, you're supposed to say you're supposed to say ruh, you're supposed to say blah, 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 blah. People argue all the time. The more pure we can get the sound, the better for our students. So with most consonants, if you think about the sound at the end of the word, right, that helps isolate the consonant sound. So when you say cat, you say t, you don't say ta. You don't say ka-at-ta. It's t. So we very truncate the sound with as little vowel as possible. That doesn't work for the R because the R always has a vowel with it at the end, like her and car. And it's easy to get that vowel sound with it. But if you can just get the as pure a r sound as possible without a vowel at the beginning or the end, that's the best. So the sound is r, right? Not and not ra, but r. Thank you. Yes. So as purely as possible. And what makes it harder for us as teachers is that as we try to project over a classroom or get kids to hear us over a microphone and all the other noise, we want to put a vowel because vowels give us volume. So we have to minimize it as much as possible, and R is the hardest one. So the sound is R. Next one, the letter is S. The sounds are S, Z, starting at 2 o'clock up to the midline, down a little bit, go across the middle, sitting on the baseline and up a little. Okay. 2 o'clock up to the midline, down. My pen's not writing smoothly today. Let me try it again. Two o'clock up to the midline, down a little bit across the middle, like from 9 to 4. Make them have it on the baseline. The sounds are s, z, z. Two sounds. And eventually we can tell the kids, it always says s if it's at the beginning of a word or beginning of a syllable. And it usually says z if it's all by itself at the end. But that'll happen.
So Emily, I have a question. So with the wonders, they only teach the first sound of every letter. So what do you do with all the other sounds that the letters make?
Wonders teaches the first sounds. There are many, many, many curriculums that only teach the first sound. And I ask, how many high frequency words are the kids learning where then they're having to say, oh, that's an exception. It's not saying s, it's saying z. And if you're teaching is, has, as, was, and you're teaching so many words and you're saying, oh, it doesn't say s, it says z, you might as well teach the sound. You might as well say, oh, you know what? You're right. It says, but guess what? I'm going to give you, you guys are so advanced. You're going to learn that it has two sounds. The sounds are s and z. So if you have many words that you're having to teach where it's like another exception, the more we teach exceptions, the more kids feel like it doesn't make sense. Oh, this is crazy. It doesn't make sense. So if you're feeling like the words that you're teaching require another exception, I'd say go ahead and teach the sound. And of my experience over the years, there have been a few students that could only learn one sound at a time. There have been. And if you have that student, that's really the, you know, that 5% maybe. You know, as we look at of 100% of kids, remember we had the visual of 5% will read no matter what. Another maybe 40% will read as long as they have any instruction. And the other 40 plus, 50 plus percent need explicit instruction in order to read. But given explicit instruction, it's really only that bottom 5, 7, 10% that really struggle, that really should be in needing specialized support. So the ones that really truly can only learn one sound at a time, they're rare. It's like maybe 5%, if that. And I've worked with many, many kids who, you know, every indication is that they're in that bottom percentile, and they're still learning. They were still able to learn multiple sounds. So my guideline is, if you find yourself saying it's an exception, if you're looking at the words that you're asking your students to read and learn, just go ahead and teach the sound. Go ahead and teach the sound. And it's easier to learn z, than to say, oh yes, this is an exception, we're using an S. Oh yes, this one's an exception, we're using an S. Oh yes, here's another exception, we're using an S. Because they all have to learn is, as, was, has, all those common words, right? So I teach it, if at all possible. Okay, next letter. The letter is T, sound is T. Line down and line across in the direction in which we write. So reinforcing directionality if at all possible. Okay. The letter U we already covered. It's my tongue going down, and the sounds are U, and at advanced levels, I might even teach U, oo, whatever. And the sound happens in words like put, which I believe is in the Fry first 100. Right? So, you know, if you don't want to teach the sound for put, because really the words the kids are going to get are put, and then butcher, and then a few words. Not too many. So in that case, if you don't want to teach the sound till later, whatever. You know what you're having to teach. So the sound, the letter is V, the sound is V. And the letter we talked about, the letter is W, the sound is W. Sorry. Angle down, angle up, angle down, angle up. And like Mrs. Laidlaw, it would like to be slender too. So can you help that one out and not make him too fat? And I'm going to go through and then I'm going to give you some odd information about some of these letters. UV, W, X. Okay, this is the other oddity, is that the letter X represents two sounds stuck together. That's why fox rhymes with socks, right? So it's two sounds stuck together. So if you were to do a training in a course and you had to test for some certification, if they say how many phonemes are in the sound, in the word fox, you have to say that there's 4 phonemes. Because it represents 2 phonemes. So it's a single letter representing 2 sounds. But letters that begin with a line start very close to the letter in front of it. So I start very close to my letter in front. I angle down, pick up my pencil, put it above where I ended, and angle down again. And I know some kids do the other way, but if we ever get to have kids do cursive, we will want them crossing their X from top to bottom. The letter Y. So X, the sound is X. If you happen to have someone whose name is Xavier, spelled with the X, you might also have to introduce that if it's at the beginning of a word, it can say Z, like xylophone and Xavier. Okay? If you don't have a kid named Xavier in your class and they're not going to read xylophone forever, you don't have to teach that sound for a long time, until you get to a higher grade, 3rd, 4th grade, and they're going to eventually read about, the light bulbs and their xenon and whatever, or even later than that. So the sound that we need to introduce is the X, and it is 2 sounds stuck together in this one grapheme. Okay, the letter Y, I like to do it as a scoopy Y. And the rationale is when you do it as this one, you get all sorts of things, and kids mess it up every which way. And I find that a scoopy Y has fewer errors. So I start very close to the letter in front of it. I drop it down, I go across, I go up, and I go down and put a shallow hook just under the surface of the water. So that's the way I prefer to do it, simply because I find fewer errors. If you teach the other way, go for it. Okay, the sounds are y, I, E. Now, you might only teach the y sound, right? Most curriculums just start with the y. And I have to tell you, this is the one that's hardest for me. I can't say it without a vowel. It's like I keep trying. I try. But for some reason, I can't get it without the vowel. Y, y. Like, I always put a vowel. Y. I'm sorry. I keep working at it. But the consonant sound is y. And I use two hands to represent. This is what happens when it's at the beginning of a word. It says y, like yes and yo-yo and yellow and yummy and whatever else they're going to run into. The sound is y only at the beginning of a base word. Like backyard or beyond, but beyond, B is really a prefix onto yond. So yond is the root word. But for what our kids are going to read at this level, it's at the beginning of a word. Yeah. Now, so I'm going to ask you, do they have to read my and try and baby in your curriculum? Well, you might as well teach the other sounds. So if they're going to have to learn those words in your curriculum, I say teach the sound, and then it's not an exception. So it's y is the consonant sound when it's at the beginning of a word. The vowel sounds are I, and E. And that's a lot, I know. But if they're going to learn my, try, right, buy, and they're going to have to learn baby, mommy, daddy, you might as well tell them that, yeah, it makes those sounds. So y, I, E. So what would I drill them on it to mastery? No. But if I've introduced it, and so when we go to do the spelling and we do orthographic mapping, where we combine, where we try to promote orthographic mapping, where we say, what's the sound? And then here's how to spell that sound. It makes it easier to say, yeah, baby, the sound is E, and I'm going to use a Y to spell E. We're going to see that a lot. Y says E. So the fewer exceptions, the better, but it's not like I'm not going to move on until they learn it. So I'll say, yeah, the sound is y. Oh, guess what? It also says I, E. We'll cover those. We'll get to those. We'll see words with those. And then, of course, trying to write with the wrong thing. The letter is Z. The sound is Z. Starts with the line, so start it very close, because kids will start this any old place, right? You know, with the letter Z, they start anywhere. So letters that begin with the line start very close to the letter in front of it. And then we go flat across, angle down, flat across. And you don't get the reversals in the Z and some of the other letters if you'll say letters that begin with the line start very close to the letter in front of it. That helps. One of the resources I want to just pop up really quickly is a cheat sheet. And Mel and Ray, I think you have it in that document I gave you last spring. A cheat sheet of vowels and their sounds and all the consonants and their sounds. So if we look across, can you see this? Are we good? Can you see it? Okay. So A, the sounds are a, ah, Technically, is the schwa sound, But it happens so often in our primary grades that they're having to read words about, above, around, mama, papa, where they're having to use the A saying I say might as well tell them. The a, sounds of the E are e. The I, the sounds are I. It also says E, but you probably won't need to until about third grade. So for your primaries, if you just teach the I, the Y, the vowel sounds of the Y are the I, E. And again, the sound, you might not have to teach at your level, but you're definitely going to hit the I and the E sounds. So you can look at this, highlight the ones that you know you're going to have to teach, the words that you're going to have to work with your students, and teach those sounds. The O, as in on, O, oo as in to, as in love. Now, do you want to hear some interesting facts? Because I think letters are interesting, and I think words are interesting. The O that says is called a scribal O. And when there was handwriting, when all the books were handwritten, and then when they used that funny block print that you remember from Old English type of work, that you saw that block printing of letters, to read the sound, the U, to say when it was next to an M or an N or a V or anything with a stroke on it was too hard to read. So if you were reading the word, mother, like there were too many points. See all these points here that were happening? It was too hard to read. And then when they did those funny block letters where you saw all those I can't even do those, those block letters I'm talking about, Old English, where they stamped the letters, and the U looked like this thing with a block here, a block here, a block here, a block here, and they had all these extra, I forget what these thingies are called, as they did these extra thingies on are they called serifs? I forget what they're called. Those extra lines on the bottoms and the tops, it made it way too hard to read. So at one point in time, these guys said, we're changing the spelling because we need to be able to read it. So they took the U sound, the sound, and if it was next to an M or an N or one of the letters that had all those strokes, they made it an O. So we have mother spelled with a O. We have love spelled with a O. We have other, brother. We have glove. We have all these words spelled with an O instead of an So anyway, interesting tidbit. I just so how many words do the kids have to learn where the O says And rather than say it's an exception, let's just go ahead and teach it. It's my view. Right? Okay. The U, it actually has two long sounds, and primary level, I don't know that I would teach two long sounds. So do you hear in music? What is the sound of the U in music? If you would unmute yourself. You say music, what's the sound of the U?
U.
Right. But say duty.
Do,
Do
ooh.
you hear the difference? So it's technically they're both the long sounds. It's just in our mouths, we can't get the y portion of the U out after certain letters. It doesn't happen. We can't. It doesn't happen. Can you say I mean, I guess you technically could say duty. And but for most words, I can't say I can say pew. I can say the U after a P, but can I say it after an R? Say the word rule. There's a rule for this. Can you say rule? You can't, right? So you say rule. So it's technically the same. The long sound is just we can't get it out of our mouths after certain letters. So we don't say reule. You know, I'm going to give you a reule. We say rule, just to let it come out of our mouths. So however you teach it at your level, if you just, you know, you, or you, and I don't know whether you're going to be getting to the word put in what you're teaching, so, or not, whether you want to teach that. And then we have all these other digraphs here and trigraphs, all of these other vowels. Now, as we talked about vowels yesterday and mentioned today, vowels are the breath. We have over 20 vowel sounds, but we only have these few letters to represent them. So we use them in different combinations. So if you would just have this resource is in what I've given you, and you look through it, you can decide which sounds you want to teach. And like the OU, I might only teach the ow sound at your level. You know, second grade, I might teach ow, o, oo, Definitely by third grade, I would. Because by third grade, we're going to be introducing the suffixes, the us, joyous, that suffix. So, but at kinder level, if you get to an OU saying ow, great. And if that's all you get to, great. For the OW, you know, you'll probably end up needing ow and o. So using this list of the sounds, you can look at what you're teaching and determine which ones you should address with your students. And if you don't address it, it's okay, because if you have to spell it, remember in orthographic mapping, if we just say the sound is whatever the sound is, and here's how we're going to spell it in this word, that's okay. It's okay. We don't have to have taught that independently. For instance, the OUGHs, I don't teach them anymore, because it's just easier to teach those words. I'm not going to make kids say, oh, ooh, uff, off, ah, ow, when they're going to remember the word though and through and rough and cough and thought. And you know, how many kids even ever read the word bow? And the only time I ever read the word bow is in some very old literature or in Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly, right? So why would I bother teaching it? It's just like, okay, in this word, you know, the OUGH is used to spell the ow sound. Okay, so this is a reference for you that you'll have, and you can look at this and determine what you should be teaching for your students. And if you don't want to teach it, just be aware that it's like, yeah, we're going to meet this spelling in some words. Okay? And that's a cheat sheet. You have it, you use it, you tuck it away, and you have it. And then for the consonants, the same thing. So most of the consonants have just their single sound that you're familiar with. Some consonants have two sounds, like the C says k or s, and the G says g, j. Now here the N has a very clear n sound when it's most of the time. But there are certain cases where it has a vowel, a very nasal sound where it becomes more nasal. So when you say bang, do you hear that your is different from when you say ban? So say ban and say bank. And do you feel the difference in your throat where your N's going? You know, it's just helpful to be, and also in the NG combination, ring, your N is sliding further back. So N's and M's are nasal, and it changes the sounds of the vowels. So S has, you know, we teach this and the Z, And the fact that it says sh in some words, I don't teach it until we have to get to that word. And then say, yeah, you know what? In this word, we're using the S to spell the sh sound. So when you balance how much you teach, so is it worth the effort? Are you inundating them with too many rules? That's not good. But if on the other side, if you've got too many exceptions, that's not good. The more times you say, oh, that's an exception, the more we're, this language is too confusing to learn. So you want to balance it. And the nice, beautiful part is where you can just say, you're right, it doesn't usually make that sound, but in this word, we are using this letter combination, this letter, to spell that sound. So the word is sure. What are the sounds? Sh, In order to spell the sh, we use an S. Yep. We don't usually use an S, but in this word, we're using an S to spell the sh sound. The sound is and we're using a UR, which maybe we've taught that UR says and we happen to have a silent E at the end. Okay. You don't have to have taught every rule and every sound. So that balancing act, that's for you and your students and what you're going to accomplish. And then I have the other consonant letter teams here and the general sounds that they spell, sounds that they represent, and sometimes they have multiple sounds, like the CH says ch. And then when it's Christmas time and you're going to write out Merry Christmas, you might as well say, you know what, we're going to use the CH to spell k. It happens. And if you have to write machine, then yeah, go ahead and just tell them, yeah, the CH is going to be used to spell the sh sound. Doesn't happen often, but it happens. And you go on. So this is for your reference, right? And for you to determine what you need for teaching your students. Okay. While I'm looking at this, we also have spelling rules here and spelling with suffixes, the silent E, the reasons we use silent E, how to make words plural, and then we go into how that affects reading, which brings me to my point that we should probably take a little break before we go on to spelling rules. So let me just coming out before we take a break. Are there any questions or any takeaways of this portion? Any questions on how we can support the various?
I think the handwriting that you were saying is really important, that the kids form their letters correctly. Just from my 3 kiddos at home, I just think it helps that consistency and, all of those techniques you were teaching, open, the circle, whatever, all those little cues just help them. Now they're seeing something, right? So they're making these various connections. So I do agree with the handwriting.
But I agree that it is difficult distance-wise, because when we're having them write, we can't necessarily see what they're writing. I try to get them to angle their iPad a little down so I can see the top of their pencil, but not necessarily. And we do a lot of things in Seesaw, which it's very different when they're not holding they're using their finger. So I tell them, okay, just take a picture of it in your journal and put it up, because I feel, I've taught kindergarten a long time ago, but like you said, I'm usually there watching how they write. And so I'm correcting. And this way, I just feel right now they're learning bad habits because we're not there and not necessarily their parents are there. So we don't know how they're, we don't know their how their, you know, their formation is doing. We just see the end of what it looks like, and we don't see their grip.
Can we make a video for the parents and these are the letters that we've taught, and here's how we would like them. Here's how we would like them to hold their pencil, and here's how we would like them to form these letters, and send it to the parents.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, we showed them some, like as we're doing it, but you know, it's not us doing it. They're just watching it, but it's quick, and I try to model it with my document camera, but I didn't even think about pencil grip, right? I don't know exactly how they're, you know, as much as they're seeing it, but that's a good idea to have that video.
Let me know if I can help with that.
Thank you.
Anything else that stands out?
I was wondering if there's an instructional sheet for how to write the letters.
I have a video.
Oh, okay.
I do have a video somewhere. I'll find it. I'll put it up. Basically what we did, but hopefully a little better organized. I don't remember.
Okay.
But I know I did one once for some kids just to have as reference. So I think I put it up in our spring when we did the spring site. I don't remember letter formation. But I'll see if I can't find it, we can make another one. Anything else? Now, my plan is to go over some basic spelling rules, and I'm going to touch on a little bit of the history of the English language and why that makes spelling difficult, and how we as teachers can use that knowledge to help us. And I want to work on how to promote the reading and the spelling through the way we instruct, whether it's a high frequency word or a regular word, through promoting orthographic mapping. So I'm going to work on that. So the lists, did some of you grab some lists, right? So we're going to try to look at that. Now, if you have a list, were you able to think about how you would use that list to teach the spelling by going from, you know, what's the sound, and here's how we spell it, that process? Or we'll do that together. But if you have lists, Katie or Lori, if you have words that you want to practice for the rest of us, that would be great too, as demonstration. And then Mel and Ray, if you have a list and you say, okay, let's look at this list and practice teaching using this list. You know, if you want to just grab that list, and we can use that list also to go over how to address the spelling, reading, encoding, decoding, the whole process. Orthographic mapping. So if you have a list handy, if you want to grab it and post it, and I'll pull it up. Okay, so let's take a few minutes break, and before we do that, is there anything else? That's my plan for the rest of today. Is there anything else that you say, hey, I really want to make sure we cover this? Because we also have to talk about blending, and blending is really important at your primary levels. It's important at all levels, but we're going to talk about blending as well. So spelling, orthographic mapping, blending. Is there anything else that you would want to make sure that we talk about? Okay, so if you have a list, great. Pull it up, post it, or grab it, and I'll write the words down and then take a 5-minute break. I'm going to share a Wakelet that has a bunch of the resources. And a Wakelet is like Padlet, except it's free as much as you want. It's just not quite as pretty yet as Padlet. So that Wakelet has a lot of resources. Or I can pull up. I have some of the wonders too, if you don't have it easy.
Yeah, I don't have it easy. It's taking a while. Sorry.
All right. So what we know from the brain is that I'm pulling this up at the same time. What we know from the brain is that the brain is wired to speak, right? And so the research says that going from speech to print is the preferred method, right? And we saw Dr. Stanislas Dehaene, or whatever his name was. I never say it right. So they know that the brain is wired to speak, and then we develop the circuitry to allow it to connect the visual input of letters, connecting letters to sounds, and then connecting those sounds in sequence to what's in our lexicon, our spoken lexicon, the words that we speak, the ones we know the pronunciation of, and then also connect it to the semantic processing where we know the meaning. So it's that connection between the visual input to recognize that they are letters, recognize that those letters represent sounds, and then connecting it into a pronunciation and reading. That is the circuitry that develops through our reading instruction, and it happens by the emphasis on sounds, not the emphasis on the visual, but on the sounds. And so Dr. Louisa Moats, she was one of the first that promoted the speech to print. And actually, she's the one who's made it popular in the more recent 25 years. But even before that, we had Romualda Spalding and the camp of some of the OG groups that taught the writing road to reading, right? That you learn to read by writing the words. And she, of course, didn't know as much back then as we know now. But by connecting from the spoken word to the reading, as opposed to going from the reading to the spoken word. So what that means for us is that we want to connect, first of all, we want to encode before we decode. We want to get kids to recognize the sounds that are in words and then be able to produce those symbols to represent those sounds. So encode before decode, and then we can decode. So for instance, I'm picking up the wonders. Let's do about wonders just so we can see. Let's say unit 3, about mid-year. List of words that you need to read. Oh, I don't want to do the silent E's yet. We'll talk about silent E's in a bit. And then words that we need to spell. Okay, so if we're going to encode before we decode, and the word is fish. I'm looking at unit 2, week 4, wonders. Okay. And where did my paper go? I've lost my paper. Oh, goodness. Okay, so the word is fish. Say the word. We always go by connecting it to the spoken word. The word is fish. Can you say? And if you can unmute, really helpful right now, please. Thank you.
Fish.
Thank you. Okay. So, how many syllables are in fish? Now, if we've talked about syllables, you can hum it, whatever. Fish. I'm asking about syllables. So, how many breaths does it take? And if you know that you're only working with one syllable words, you might not need to do this stuff. But if you're into syllable and 2 syllable words, I would introduce the step of asking how many syllables are in the word. So let me again look at fish. at my list and see if there's any 2-syllable words. This list has only 1 syllable. So if I were working with 1 syllable, I won't even ask that. So fish. Okay. What are this? Let's say the sounds. And I can do it here as I'm writing, or using, some people put blocks out to represent the sounds, and then they write on the blocks. So whether you do it on your whiteboard, paper under your .cam, or if you're doing it on a Jamboard, however you want to do it. So let's first identify, what are the sounds we hear? Let's say the sounds. Say the sounds, please. Okay, good. I heard 3 sounds, and you heard 3 sounds. Good. Let's say the sounds again. The
Emily, are we supposed to see what you're writing?
I'm
You're not
so
presenting.
sorry. Thank you.
I see you writing something. I'm like,
Thank you. And here, I
no,
don't
no,
even
no,
have.
no. We've done that before too, so.
Oh, and oh my goodness, I recorded through the whole thing. I forgot to turn off the recording. Okay. So the word is fish, and we heard 3 sounds. Fish. Now, the first sound. Say the first sound again. Good. And we will spell it with a F. Sound is, and it's spelled with an F. What's the next sound? I. The sound is I. I spell it with a I. And at this point, you would expect, right? The next sound is sh, and we spell it with a SH. Excellent. Let's say our sounds again. What did we spell the sh sound?
SH.
S8.
What did we use to spell the sound?
F.
To spell the I sound. Sorry, the I sound.
I.
Okay.
We needed help.
This is entirely regular. Everything here is what they would normally assume to use, right? So this is a very regular word. Let's do a couple more of these regular words, and then we'll go into ones that are more difficult. The word is, let's pick with. Say the word.
With.
Good. What are the sounds we hear? Say the sound. Good. You're right. I heard 3 sounds too. The first sound is, and we will spell it with a W. Next word. Sorry, next sound. Next sound. And I'm going to spell it with a
I.
Right. Good. Next sound. Good. And I will spell it with a
TH.
Excellent. Let's say the sounds again.
With.
And I might do this. Oops, if I had my eraser going. Spell the sounds again. Excellent job. However you.
So Emily, what are you presenting on your iPad, and you're writing on your iPad?
No, I have a touch screen. So I'm using
your
a
computer.
Computer. Right. But I've done it with the iPad where I join with the iPad and present from that. I also just got, because it was under $30 on Amazon, I got one of the writing tablets and use it. It just takes a little bit of practice, but I was trying to see if I could get my students to use it, because I was thinking, for my students, $30, they can afford that to help with the writing. For a lot of my students have, my personal students have iPads that they use, but some don't. So I was trying that, because you can get the inexpensive writing tablets for under $30. And so
I
for
think
those
we would
kids,
just use our dock camera and a
Yep.
whiteboard and
Yeah, that's what
dry
we've been
erase
using.
marker.
yeah, and you have a dock camera. That's makes it so much easier, right? I was just trying to figure out what I could do for my students so I could see more of their writing.
Yeah.
The only thing
So
with the dot camera is there's a lag. It's at least mine is, so that it's a little frustrating with that.
yeah, the
That's why I
writing
was
tablets.
asking you.
The writing tablet's nice, but it's just like learning to use a mouse that you look at your screen and you figure out where you're putting it down with your hand. So it's like that, but I thought, okay, I'm playing with it a little bit to see if my students could use it. But some of the kids have that Osmo, right? So the Osmo can be used like a document camera. So if a kid has an Osmo, or if you have it in your classroom, that can be a document camera, and that's like $20
What is an
if you
Osmo?
already have an iPad. If you already have an iPad.
Osmo is a type of, what is it, tablet?
It's a toy thing that holds your tablet, and your tablet uses the tablet camera to look, and you can put tangrams, and you can do letters, you can do things on the table in front of it. But so if kids have it, they can use it. So if they have it as a toy, it can be used as a document camera. But so some of my tutoring students have it, but I don't know how many of our other students don't, have it or not. But anyway, I have a touch screen, and
Okay.
when my other computer died, it was the same price as a non-touch screen, so I figured I'd get it. But I had my iPad, I used that too. But document cameras, whatever we're using. Okay, so the word is want. Say the word.
Want.
Excellent. Tell me the sounds that you hear. What sound? Good. Now I heard 4 sounds. You heard 4 sounds. Good job. What's the first sound you heard? And we're going to use the W. What's the next sound you hear? Ah. If I have taught at a as the A, I will say whatever I've already, I will reinforce what I've already taught. If I haven't, I just need to say I'm going to use the A to spell in this word. So we can be very simplistic and just say, in this word, I'm going to use the A to spell what's the next sound you heard? And we had one more sound. What was it? Good. Now, as you're looking at this, was there any spelling that was not what you expected? You're a first grader. Be a first grader for a second. Was there any sound that's not what you expected to spell it with? Yeah. Okay. We sort of was expecting an an O to say So I'm going to just mark this one. Oh, that's not my highlighter. I'm having a hard time today. We can sort of just say, hey, this one is not what I expect. You can underline it. Some people draw a heart around it, whatever they want to do. That just to draw attention to, that's not really what I expected to do. That's okay. That's how we spell it in this word. If you have taught A is a, you can say that we are using the A to spell and A often is used to spell after a W or in front of an L, like walk and wall and want and whatever, and in front of a L, like talk and walk, fall and fall. So if you've taught it, you can reinforce it. If you haven't taught it, we at least say where you're going to use an A to spell the ah sound. Now, rather than say this is a sight word, you just have to learn W-A-N-T, want, you want to recognize what is expected and what is less expected, so that we're not having to memorize W-A-N-T, want, W-A-N-T, want, W-A-N-T, want. All we're going to have to do is say, oh yeah, it had that one part there that was a little odd. Okay. So the current saying that people are using with high frequency words is that, well, first of all, every word wants to be a sight word. There's no such thing as a sight word that you have to just learn by sight. We want all words to become permanently restored, that we recognize it by sight. But to get there, we orthographically map the sound to the symbol in that sequence. But unusual spellings or unusual representations need more recognition to what's regular and what's happening, not less. So our tendency was, we used to say, oh, you just have to remember W-A-S was, H-A-S has, or, L-O-V-E love. That you just had to remember the whole thing and say all the letters and learn it that way. But what we're saying now is that you want to bring attention to the regular parts and then the parts that are not as you expect, so that you can give more attention to that and point out, yeah, you know what? This word, we're going to use the A to say ah. Okay. So there are some programs now that are calling them heart words, because you have to learn that one part by heart. But whatever. The word is, Bernie, I'm going to mute you. Oops. Okay, thanks. The word is call. Say the word.
Call.
Okay.
Call.
Call.
What are the sounds we hear in call?
Call.
Good job. Good job. Now, what's the first sound? And I will use a C. And hopefully you're teaching the students the difference between C and K. One of the rules that we only use a K if the next letter is a E, I, or Y. But however it is that you're going to say the rule about the C and the K, you can reinforce it. But the least you say is that we're going to use the C to spell K. What's the next sound you hear? Ah, right. We're going to use the A to spell the ah. Ah. What's the next sound? Oh. And in this word, I'm going to use l, and I'm actually going to use two of them. So I have two l's. Now, if I'm teaching the rules, I'm going to reinforce the rules that A often after a W or in front of an L, and I can see it's in front of the L. I can teach the rule that always use a C unless you have to use a K, or use the K in front of E, I, or Y. Whatever ones you are teaching, you can reinforce here. Or if you teach the rule that we often double F, L, and S after a single vowel at the end of a base word. If you're teaching the rules, reinforce the rules. If you haven't taught the rules, you need to say, we will use a C to spell the K sound in this word. We're going to use the A to spell the ah sound. And we're using two L's to spell the l sound. Is there any part here that is not what you would have expected? Okay. And, whether you're going to do the heart, whether you're going to highlight it, whether you want to just underline a different color, whatever you want to do, you can say, yeah, we hear the ah sound. We usually use the O to spell ah, but in this word, we're spelling it with an A. And you might teach the rule that A often says ah in front of the L or after a W and put other words in here. That's to you. But the minimum we do is just identify sound to the symbol in that sequence. Okay.
And it would probably be, I mean, most kids won't know it's the two L's.
Yeah, that's what I was
Also.
going to say.
Okay, so
I mean, our kindergartners would not know it's two L's. They'll write it with just one L.
What did you say the rule was, Emily? You make it a double.
We often double
when there's
F,
two one sound.
L, or S
Oh.
after a single vowel at the end of a base word. And that's on one of the rules on that cheat sheet I gave you. And so that's why we see, you know, mess and bell and fall and words with an F, L, and S. Some people call it the floss rule. Some people call it FSLZ, you know, because Z is often doubled too. There are going to be rules. There are words that don't follow, like the word bus. We don't spell it with two S's. We spell it with one S. So we're not doubling that S. But that comes because it comes from a foreign word. It was first
foreign.
So Emily, what do you
or whatever?
Sorry. What do you suggest? Like, this is so much to remember, right? So how I mean, the more you use it, you're going to remember it. But if we had to focus, like, on what to start with, like, how do we remember all of this and try to incorporate?
So what I would do is I go through the list and I try to think of it as if I'm the kindergartner, which is the part that is not, you know, not automatic. And make sure to talk about that part. And if I don't want to talk about doubling the L's yet, I'll just say, in this word, we're going to use two L's. Okay. And, you know, if you want to do another mnemonic device to help you remember, but eventually you're going to have to teach that we often double F, L, and S after a single vowel at the end of a base word. So it's like, okay, why are there two L's? So you just ask yourself, why are there two L's? And find that rule. And whether or not you master it if you say it this time and then you say it the next time it comes up, you say it the next time it comes up, pretty soon it becomes part of your vocabulary and their vocabulary, and it just happens. And when you have kids say, oh yeah, I picked two S's because we often double F, L, and S. It's like, oh, you know, you paid attention. But so you look at your list and say, what are the questions the kids are going to have? Why does that happen? And let's address it. I mean, if it's something that happens frequently, like the A saying ah, that happens pretty often in our first grade words and kindergarten words, right? We have ball and call and fall and, you know, and want and all of those words. So I might say it. But if it's something that's just going to happen this time, just draw attention to it. Yeah, you know what? I don't normally spell it that way, but in this word, I'm going to spell it this way. And look at what their high frequency words were day, her, want, or vocabulary. Yeah, so all call, day, her, and want were the high frequency words on this list. And so they're drawing attention to all and call, and then they have want. So they have 3 words on this one list where the A is saying ah. So that's going to be something you're going to say at least 3 times here. And during the week, as you practice it, you come back to practice your spelling. Let's draw attention to it, okay? Okay, the word was call. Anyone remember what did we use to spell the ah sound in call? And draw attention to it again. So the research shows that a neurotypical developing reader can, if they pay attention to the sound, to the symbol in that sequence between 1 to 4 times, it gets stored in their long-term memory. We shouldn't have to do it 20, 30 times. Okay, so, but it is sound, symbol, sequence. So,
symbol, sequence.
Yeah, so what was the sound you heard in call? What was that first sound? And what did we use to spell that sound? You're right, we used a C to spell the k sound. So as you're bringing up the words again, drawing attention to the various parts so that their brain is recognizing the sound to the symbol correspondence. Okay. And if you know what's coming up and you can see like, okay, we're doing a lot of this, and you say, okay, I'm going to just put the rule out there this time, and then I'm going to put the rule out there again when it comes up again. They'll learn the rules, and most of them, right? What we want, the reason rules are important is that we know there's a good 50% of kids that need that explicit instruction in order to read. Some kids will figure it out. They've read call, they've read ball, they've read wall. They figured out that they use the A to say ah in those words, and they're going to use 2 L's. They've picked up the code. Other kids need that explicit instruction, right? So if you give it to them, it doesn't hurt the ones that do figure it out on their own. And it absolutely helps those that need the explicit instruction. So yeah, there's, I go with about 30 spelling rules that I keep in my head that I say over and over again. And I can learn 30. It took me a little while, but I learned 30. Okay, and the kids learned them faster than I did. But using them helps so that when the kids who needed that explicit instruction, they're not floundering with, okay, I've seen this pattern before. What was the pattern? And oh yeah, that reminds me of this word, and I'm going to use ALL. They know that A often says ah. We often use A to say ah in front of a L sound, in front of the L sound. And if the word ends with F, L, and S, we usually double it. So explicit instruction hurts no one, and it helps. And we don't become masters all at one time, but kids learn, we learn. It can come together. Most important things, recognizing the sound, the symbol we're using to represent that sound in the sequence. Now, I think yesterday I gave the example of was or does. Which did we use yesterday? Let's use the other one. I think it was does. So was. So if the word is was, say the word.
Was.
What are the sounds we hear? Let's listen to the sounds.
What?
Say the sounds.
What?
I heard 3 sounds. Good. You heard 3 sounds with me. What was the first sound you heard?
What?
Good. And we are going to spell it with a W. That's what we would expect. What's the next sound you heard? In this word, we're going to use the A to spell the sound. What was the last sound you heard? I heard Z. You're right. I heard Z. I'm going to use an S to spell Z. Is that a trick, guys?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The what? I kind of expected that, but you know, these other parts here, boy, that kind of threw me. Let me mark those. I was not really expecting this. If this is your first introduction, right? And I wasn't really expecting this. So girls love hearts. Boys don't care so much about hearts. Put a dot, whatever it is, but draw attention. Yeah, I wasn't really expecting that. Now, this might be their first introduction to the S saying zzz. So you say, you know what, guys? the S is often used to say z at the end of a word. Do you want to see another one? You want to see it? The word is. Let's say the word.
Is.
Good. What are the sounds we hear?
Is.
Z. Spell those sounds. The first sound is?
I.
The sound is I, and we spell it with an I. What's the next sound? Oh, what's the sound in the word is? Tell me the sound you hear in is.
Is.
You hear that z sound? Guess what? I'm going to spell it with a S. There it is again. Do you like that? We often do use the S to spell z when it's at the end of a word. So you can point it out and teach it. But the least to do is to recognize that it's there. So the minimum is recognizing the sound and the symbol that's being used to spell that sound. Okay. And if you connect it to a rule that you're going to teach, you might as well teach, go for it, or a sound that you're going to teach, go for it. But the very minimum is to recognize what is the spelling of that sound. So sound to symbol, right? So when I say symbol, that's how we're spelling it, the letters we're using to spell it. Okay. And then we have has, and then we have as, and whatever else that you might also be doing. So if I was doing kindergarten and if I had the word was on my list, and that's often one of the very first sight words, right? I will go ahead and at the same time introduce is. Might as well. Because you know they're going to read that one almost as often. Okay. Okay, so if it's a regular word, it's easier. It's just sounds that we hear, you know, if it's a transparent representation, so the sound maps directly to the symbol that we expect, that's easy. When you get to something that's not what you expect, you draw more attention to it, not less, right? So rather than say, oh, don't sound it out, just remember it. Right? We used to say, don't even bother sound it out. It's a sight word. You're just going to remember it. And we'd show them the flashcard. This is, and this one is, and this one is. So when we used to teach that way, we weren't promoting that sound to symbol. So now we know that they will learn it faster when we correspond the sound to the symbol. And I mean, I remember we used, you know, that's even in OG, it was like, oh, that's a sight word. You just have to, or a red word or whatever we called it. You just are going to have to memorize this. And now we know from research that it works better when you give them the parts, let them see that, oh yeah, all these parts are regular. It's just this one part that's weird. Or it's just maybe two parts that's weird. It's not the whole thing. Okay. Any other words? Or who had a list that was for their grandson? Yeah. What are some of the words on your list? You don't remember. Hold on. The Phineas can see it bigger. Okay. Island, die, mix, sun, eggs, baseball, snack, hiking. Okay. Island and hiking. That's more like second. What grade is this?
He's first grade.
First grade.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate it when they do. Okay. All right. Let's do it. Let's do hiking, and let's do island.
I don't follow that. Okay.
Okay. Let's do it.
See, what I was doing was I was doing the sound and then he would write the letter because I needed practice. But then he would say it's B, not B. I said something and he corrected me. I said, very good. Gramps, you got to start again. So how do you do the eggs one?
Okay.
That was a tricky one.
Yeah, eggs is a little weird because we can say A, like it's the long A,
Yeah.
right? Eggs.
Uh-huh.
So one of the things that we do is we overpronounce certain words. Like, how many of you, when you go to spell Wednesday, do you say in your head, Wednesday? You do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. In my head, when I spell Wednesday, I say Wednesday.
Yeah.
To help me remember. Or library. And I make sure I overpronounce the R in library or the D in Wednesday
Uh-huh.
to help me remember that it's there. Or separate. It's not separate, separate. And so I overpronounce that it's R, not right? So in my head, I'm hearing those things to help me spell it. So you can do that think to spell where you overpronounce the parts that are giving you trouble. That's a good technique. If it's totally weird, you can do other mnemonics or association with meaning. So like an older kid, like I have a 7th grade kid who's into Percy Jackson and science and whatnot. And so for him, Wednesday, I said, oh, do you know it was named after the god Woden? And it was Woden's Day. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that. That's cool because he was into these things. So when we went from Woden and we named it Wednesday, it's because it was named after Wode. So there's a D in it. So if you connect meaning to spelling in a way that the student remembers it, great. But if you've got 25 kids, it's often the easiest thing is to do the overpronunciation to help us remember the sound. So I would say, you say eggs, I'm going to think eggs. Let's say it the same way I'm going to say it. Everyone, let's say it together. Eggs.
Egg.
And I'm going to say the sound with the one finger opening. Eggs. And there are words, G's, any of the vowel things, anything that happens back in your throat, like a G and a C happens all the way back in your throat. Say G. Do you feel the tongue movement in the very back of your throat? And any of the nasals like and nasal sounds and sounds that happen very back in your throat shifts your vowel. Like is usually said up here, but when you're saying getting your tongue back to make the G, it shifts the sound enough that it sounds a little different, right? So so I'm aware of that as a teacher. So when I have a sound like connected to a G, the vowel sound might be a little mushy. And anything connected to one of the strong nasal ones, like when you say ring, do you say I? You make the I sound in ring, or does it sound more like ringing? It's because your tongue is sliding backwards to get that nasal sound. So I'm aware of that as the teacher. And it really doesn't matter. You can just say, hey, let's think to spell ring. And if you hear yourself saying ing, we don't have any words with a e. It's really a trying to be an I saying but our mouth is moving. So for eggs, I can think eggs. I can overpronounce eggs.
Eggs.
And or you can say, the sound is Let's try to say it with the sound. And the sound is eggs. And any word that has a suffix on it, like the S, I will point out that it means more than one, right? Because we know we're going to teach that. Okay. And if I only had one, what would the word have been if it was only one of them? Word would
No,
be
this
egg.
oh, I'm sorry.
So if the word was eggs, that's on the spelling list. I'm still going to point out what would the singular be, egg. And I will say, okay, let's try to say egg. And if we can really think egg, it might help us remember. So if we say we spell with g. And in this word, I'm going to use two of them.
Yeah.
And eggs.
Eggs.
I hear the z, and it's a z. So if you say eggs and you say it with an A, and everyone else says eggs, you can say, you know what? I'm going to use the E to spell that.
Yeah.
Okay. And you point out we're using two G's to spell the G. There was okay, we're going to take a break for a second from this, and I'm going to show you my a picture of English history, which I had up on which screen? It is in this. If the slides work. Okay. Let's see if it works. So English history. We like to think in Hawaii that we have pidgin. We have the combination of many languages. You know what? English was one of the original pidgins. Why is it not working? This is, okay, here it goes. It's starting to work. It's so weird that Google wasn't working well. So every place, every nation group that came into England influenced its language. And every time England went out into other nation groups, that influenced their language. So very quickly, we look at this. What we now have as the English language started out in what they called the PIE and an Indo-European primary Indo-European, I forget what the P stands for, primary or primitive Indo-European language. And then there was the Celtic influence, there's a Latin influence, the Anglo-Saxon influence, Norse influence, all these other influences that happened over time. So what we recognize now as English is mostly words coming from Old English being down here, this era here, and it being the Anglo-Saxons. These people were the farmers. These people were the laborers. These people worked their fields and worked their farms. So those are the most basic words. And those are still the most basic words that we have in our language today. And they're the kindergarten, first grade words. We're talking about house, and we're going to talk about all the things that are involved in our everyday life, normal objects around us. Okay? That's the Old English, the Anglo-Saxon influence. Then we go into the period where there was the Norman French influence, and French influence came into England. We had a French influence of the language, and we had the Latin influence. So Latin was the language that was spoken by the people in charge, and there was French. So this is where we got so much of our Latin influence. And then we had this other mixing of that happened with Greek and the Romance languages that happened later on. One of the big things that happened was the printing press. So just keeping those basic chunks, right? Anglo-Saxon, these are the workers. These are the people who live day to day in their farms. Then we had the French Latin influence. These were the upper class people who were in charge. And then we had the other influences that came in. And then let's also remember the printing press. So where that comes into play, I don't know if you can see this. Is this visible? And you have this in what I've sent you. Anglo-Saxon If it's an old word, these are the common words. That's about 80% of our basic language are the Anglo-Saxons. And guess what? They had the craziest spellings. So all the crazy spellings come from the Anglo-Saxons. It means so many of the crazy words that we have to teach in kindergarten and first grade, these are Anglo-Saxon words with these crazy Anglo-Saxon spellings, funny letter combinations, the OU, the EIGH, the EI, the EY, the OUGH, the OU, the OW, all of those. Thank you very much, Anglo-Saxon people. The beauty of it is that if you can get through those words, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, we don't meet too many more of those crazy spellings in the upper grades. So it's the kinders and the first grade teachers that have to teach really hard words. And I'm sorry, right? So the really crazy spellings, the really odd things happen in the kindergarten, first grade level, because those are the basic words we use every day. Now, the Latin French influence that happens, they were the politicians, they were the people in charge, they were the nobility. So anything to do with the legal system and running the government, that was the Latin influence. And Latin words are so much easier to spell. We have just very, very, very few oddities, like using the TI to say shh, or the CI or SI to say shh. That's a Latin influence. But we have very few oddities in the Latin influence. And then Greek, that's what we mostly use in our medical and scientific world. So we don't have to worry too much about that in our primary grades. So when we have these odd spellings, and here's one of the things that gets interesting. Bring back here. The odd spellings and the odd sounds, we know it just in the course of our lifetimes that the way we pronounce words now is different from the way we used to pronounce words, right? And slang happens and it becomes more accepted. Well, can you imagine over the course of 800, 1,000 years, because a lot of these Anglo-Saxon words are 800 years old, the pronunciation has changed. So all these words with the IGH used to be pronounced, and the KNs used to be pronounced. It was a knife, and I hurt my knee. And the IGH was this ugh sound, like, you know, in those German movies when you say it always sounds like they're gargling. Okay, that was the sound of that GH when it was spoken in the English language. And it's like, we hate coming across those words with the IGH and the OUGH and the EIs and EYs and EIGHs. And I just tell the kids, aren't you thankful we don't have to say it like that? That I don't have to say I'm 8 years old and I want to wake myself on the scale and, you know, that ached me, and you know, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm glad I don't have to say it like that. But those odd spellings are those very, very old words. So yes, it's difficult for kindergarten and first grade, but if we can get through that and just say, hey, you know what, in this word we're using an IGH to spell I. So when I spell the word right, my right hand, the sounds are R, I, T. And I'm going to use the IGH to spell I in right. And if we get them through that, just at least recognizing those common spellings for those common words, it doesn't keep getting harder as they get older, it gets easier. Okay. So yes, those are odd spellings and they are odd sounds and there's a lot of them. But if we can just associate, at least in the words that we have to meet, that the sound is whatever, the spelling is whatever, and get past it, get through it. So some of them we have to practice, and some of them they have to learn to mastery. But the more that they have mastered, the less that they have to use context in order to figure out the word. So, you know, every time we tell a child, oh, did that make sense? What word makes sense in that sentence? Every time we're taking them out of being able to simply decode the word, we're using much more of their cognitive power, and it takes them away from the end goal, right? Because they only have so much cognitive power to put on their decoding. So learning those eventually to mastery would be the goal. And if you can't learn it to mastery, at least familiarity with, that's the sound, here's the spelling, let's move on. Okay, so I'd like to talk about blending. So we know, does anyone remember I said that there were 4 basic things we need to do in order to read? Anyone remember that from the very first time? We have to know that words are made up of sounds. We have to know that the sounds are represented by letters. We have to be able to pull them apart, which is that segmentation, which is what we've been doing, right? The last absolute necessity is we have to be able to put the sounds together. And we have students that can tell you, oh yeah, I see a k and I see a and I see a t, but they can't say cat. They say, oh, it's k, t, fish. And we have to teach them to put sounds together. So that's where I want to go next. Before I do that, is there any questions, or do we need a quick break, bathroom break, water break, before we go into this last section here on blending? Anyone? We good? Okay. I know we went through all of that very quickly, but if we need help, we'll help each other. So in blending we define as the skill of putting sounds together. And where's my blending? So we need to put sounds together. If you're using the Hegarty curriculum, they have their own hand signals and blending. But however you're going to do it, we need to be able to put sounds together. And if we can do it, oh shoot, wrong thing. If we can do it to automaticity, that's best. If we can do it so that we don't have to think about the process, that's the desire. So in anything we do, whether it's dance or sports or crochet, you learn content, right? I can read, how do I make that stitch in crochet? How do I, if I'm cooking, what is the recipe? If I'm playing a sport, I need to know the rules. So you learn content. And then you have to learn skills. Here's how to physically make that stitch, right? You learn, here's the skill of chopping the onions, or here's the physical skill of shooting your ball. And then you have to do some of the background work, right? You have to be able to get where that stitch happens by muscle memory, or that chopping happens. So, my son's a professional chef. He can chop an onion into a mince, into these 1/8-inch dice without looking at it. I'm like, how do you do that? But it's just like he's done it so much. He just does it. He knows exactly how much he's moving, and he has these perfect 1/8-inch mints without looking. Or if it's, basketball, you sit there and you throw 800 free throws, or you serve your tennis ball, you toss it, you practice the toss, you practice the toss, you practice the toss, you practice the lift, you practice the toss and the lift together, you practice it and practice it, you practice it. That's not the end goal. The end goal is playing the game of tennis, or playing basketball, or producing something tasty to eat, or having a crocheted item that you're proud of. But that practice area helps us to reach the end goal, right? So some of what we do is that practice. And then for a lot of the things, you go in the weight room. Like, really? Does anyone lift weights when they're playing basketball? or tennis, nobody stands out there on the court with their weights. That's not the goal. But doing that work allows you to be a stronger player. So some of what we do in reading is learning the content. You have to know the sounds. You have to know the rules, whatever. We know we need to know the content. Some of it is the, learning how to put it together. I'm going to say cat. And some of it is that work of the practice that builds the muscle, whether it's weight room or drill. So in blending, we need to teach the skill of putting sounds together, and then we need to do that weight room practice or that standing at the free throw practice, and just do it enough times that the process happens automatically. So blending, you can do blending without any sounds at all. Oh, sorry, without any letters at all. You can do blending purely as an auditory exercise. So when I say at, and we smash it together, what do you hear? And hopefully the student will hear cat, not fish. But there are some students that's very difficult. Okay, can you see this? Now, I have made blending books. I don't know if you can see this. Forever, would put sounds and flip cards, and I was always carrying around too many things, and it took me forever to make a book. So I made a digital blending board, and this is to practice the skill of blending. Now, there is no reading comprehension here. I get it that this is not the goal. This does not promote reading comprehension. This is just building the muscle and making it automatic. So we want our, once they know the sounds, we want them to know that it's a p, and hear themselves saying pum. But what we see is so many students isolate the sounds. So if I had the sentence, the cat and the dog went home, and I have to read it this way, okay, that's a sight word, the cat. Oh, so if I see on the page, the at cat and the dog went. And if I'm having to work sound by sound, we have no comprehension because we've overtaxed their working memory. No one can keep all those isolated bits of information together, right? So if I said, I want you to memorize this, the people who memorize the 20, 100, 300 digits of pi. I mean, I have a hard enough time with phone numbers, right? So, but if you told me your phone number and told me digits, I'd have a hard time. But if you gave it to me 3 digits at a time, I'm okay. But I have to unitize it. So I'm not saying, 2, 5, 4, 3, 7, 2, 7, 6, 5, 8. Like, I can't remember that. Right? So I need to unitize. So what we do here is we give the kids the ability to unitize bits of information to make the chunks. So here, what we want is not to say pum, but we want to be able to say pum. And some kids can do it and some can't. If they can't do it, they do need explicit instruction on combining the sounds in sequence. So if a student is saying it, rit, and if that's how they do each sound by sound and then join it together, they will not be able to get meaning from their reading. Right? They have to unitize. So if I can tell a student, you know what, I want you to just think the sound and then think the sound and say it all together. If they can do it, great. Many of them can't. So we have to start back at saying, you know what? I'm not even going to show you the other sound until we get these two together. Okay. So I will start by presuming I've chosen letters that the student is familiar with the sounds. So they're fairly secure on the sounds. So I know that the student knows the sound and they know the ass sound. Okay. And I'll say, I know you can see it. And you know what that one says. That one says, and that one says at. And I might start by giving them the sound. Say, right, you know that one says, and you know that one says at, but here's what we're going to do. Don't say anything until you put it together. And I want to hear you say sa. Because if you can get a student to blend through the vowel, adding on the rest is fairly easy. It's easy to add on. Now, a lot of people say, oh, but I taught the families. I taught at, cat, fat, mat, sat, bat, rat. And then I taught an, pan, fan, van. And that was one way that we used to teach things. The problem is that when you teach it by word family, you're training the student to look towards the end of the word and then come back to the beginning. And that's an inefficient method. Okay. So rather than teaching by families, getting them to start at the beginning and work their way through. Right. So we see this, we see the ah. Let's put it together and say sa. And once you can say sa, I'm going to show you the next sound. So it's sa, and you can hold, remember vowels are the breath. We can hold that vowel as long as we need to until we get the next sound out. Ready? Sa. And it's taking too long. Says. So we want to train them to keep the sounds connected. Before I made this, I would take my books and take a page, and I would say, okay, I'm not going to show you that one. And I would, show them a couple of sounds. You know that sound, right? That's the d, and you know that sound, that's the s. Put it together. Da. Sorry, I've got it twisted here. Back. So I have done it with holding books and covering and uncovering. And
so Emily, you created that in is that Google? That's an Excel.
It's a Google Sheet.
A sheet.
Yeah.
And then it moves by itself.
Yes.
How do you do that?
I figured out. I'm just like, there's got to be a way to do this. And Google Sheets has a randomizing feature and it has a macro feature. And I YouTubed it and figured out how to make them work, and I put it together.
Wow.
And you will have this.
Okay.
If you want it. And just like 2 weeks ago, another company put out something, a professional one that does very much like this. Not quite this where it uncovers, like covers and uncovers, but at least where it can change the sounds. So I was really excited that a professional company has put one out, but it doesn't do this uncovering portion that mine does.
So the letters are random. You're not controlling which letter you want, but
no. So which means that I can't prevent profanity or inappropriate words. But here's my thought. In this one, if I see certain letters come up in the first two positions, I just change it before I even wonder what the third. So I won't get to the word fun, because if I see the first two letters together, I'm not even going to risk third B.
Okay.
But my thing is that if I'm having to work on blending, I'm going to read it faster than the student. If a student's reading it as quickly as I am, I don't need to do the exercise anymore. Right? So I have only really messed up once, and that's when I hit change and then something else caught my attention and I had to make a note of something. And then I look back up and I was like, oh my goodness. But it's only happened one in a very long time. So this one, when I change it, I cover up the third column. And it is being super slow today. So you see the sound? Don't say it. Think the sound. Think the sound. Ready? Tell me when you're ready to say it together. Go ahead, say it together. And this together, it is ma. When I hear that they've got it together, mot. And you just drop on that last sound. Dropping on that last sound is super easy for kids. It's combining the first sounds that is difficult. That's where our kids have a hard time. Now, Mel, you saw some of my students last year that had to go through this. He's now reading 2-syllable words with ease. That one student. Yeah. He's looking and he's decoding words like compass and indeed. And it's like in just, giving students the ability to blend the sounds quickly. Because if I had to read the word indeed and I say I'm not going to get to indeed. But if I teach them how to chunk it and then it's indeed, boom, it's got it. Okay. So we want to give kids the skill of putting the sounds together with automaticity, that skill. So obviously there's no meaning here. And for the kids to say, what does that mean? And so some of my kids I can be silly with and I say, well, in my queendom, this means this. This is the little child who asks a million questions all the time. And this next word, that's how I feel when this child has success and does what he's told. It gives me such mot. Or whatever it is. I can be silly about it, but I often will go back to, hey, you're not going to just read these simple words. You're going to read longer words, I promise you. So that means you have to be able to read the portions of the words. Right? So we give the kids the skill of putting sounds together. And yes, they're nonsense right now, but every word that the student doesn't know is a nonsense word at that point. They still have to be able to put the sounds together. So when this is happening smoothly, okay, the sound is, I might start by saying, so that they're not having to think as hard. I say, yeah, you know that the sound is y and the sound is eh. Okay, but don't say anything. Wait and put it together. And when you put it together, I'm going to open it up. Ready? Go. What was the sound? Yeah. And if you've read Dr. Seuss, you know you need to read words like yop. Yop was a very important word, right, in his book. They had to yell it. So we go through this process of getting the students to blend the first two sounds together continuously, adding on the third. And then once they can do that, then I can say, okay, we're going to do the same thing here. But remember, don't even think about that last sound until you have the first sounds together. Because the tendency is to go back to cuss. Because I don't know why, because that's what they thought they were supposed to do, or whatever. Say, oh, wait. Don't say anything until you get at least the first two sounds together, and then we just drop on the last sound. So I want to hear cuss. So I do, we do, you do, right? And we'll do it together, and I'll, demonstrate. But remember, I'm not even going to look at that last letter. I'm going to think, I see the and I see the air. I'm going to keep it in my brain until I put it together and I say vit. Now I can look at the last letter and say vit. And so I demonstrate, and then we do it together. Then I ask the student to do it. And say, but if I hear them go back to the b, tob, I say, wait. remember, let's keep our sounds together. And if I have to go back to, remember, I'm not even going to show you the sound unless we can keep these together. And you know, my favorite 5th grade, now 6th grade student from last year who had such difficulty, he is putting together, you know of whom I speak, Mel? And he was at this sound by sound by sound by sound. He is now putting together C, V, C, C, B, C, C words, continuously blending, where he says splint or whatever, where he's being able to put them all together. Because we practice, we give him the skill, and then we practice that skill so this it happens automatically. So I like to think about when I was a little girl, my mom taught me to tat. Does anyone know what tatting is? You know what tatting is? Okay, so it's lace making. And I did it more than 50 years ago. I tatted. And not too long ago, I was going through some things and I found her old tatting shuttle. Hers with her work on it. I was like, oh, this is so precious. Oh my goodness, this is so special. And I said, I remember how to do this. And I picked it up and I did it. It's like, oh, how did I do that? How did I do that? We create muscle memory. We know we create muscle memory for physical muscles. I know the brain is not a physical muscle, but a lot of it happens the same way. We give the brain that automaticity of finding that pathway of doing that work, putting. And when they can sit there and go top and as quickly as I can change it. Now, could I do this with wordless? I could do it with wordless. The problem with wordless is that so many of our kids have memorized so many of our CVC words. They are not truly putting sounds together. So by using nonsense words, pseudo words, I am able to assess whether or not they are putting sounds together. Okay. And this is working very slowly, but generally I can go tap, 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 tap. And the time it takes me to tap, and if they are putting the sounds together, they've got automaticity. When they go as quickly as I can tap it, and they're saying the words pat, piv, pick, you know, whatever. It's happening a little slowly right now, but when they're saying it that quickly, they've got the automatic. Then they're not using a lot of cognitive power to put the words together. It's not going to be the k, at, you know, cat, at, and dog, dog, and went, and they've already forgotten what they've read. They will be able to read the cat and the dog went, whatever. So getting that skill. Once we can work at this level, then we can go to other levels. I can do initial blends, and I can do digraphs, and I can do whatever. And I have done it where this was hidden first, if the student needed it, because I will show you at another time, but it's easy to modify this to make that happen. So, so then we might go to fruff and socks and whatever. Or I have the BBCCs, TOSP, WESP, whatever. And we'll go through. So I have the different levels put out. And I have R controlled where we practice some of our R controlled sounds. And then I have vowel teams. I also have silent E's, but so for vowel teams, there are, whatever this is, 18 vowel teams. I'm not going to practice 18 of them. I might practice 3 or 4. So because it's just a digital file, I end up making a copy for each kid because it's just a few kilobytes, whatever it is. It's, you know, it doesn't take up any space. And I delete what I don't need, and I change to what I do need. It's that part's not hard to do. And I might just practice, you know, this student is practicing the EE, the EA, and the AI. So we'll just practice those and blending these. So I can use it to reinforce, practice the blending, but reinforce the phonics at the same time. Okay. In my older students, you come to a word that you don't know, and it has a vowel team. You don't know which sound to use. You have to try both sounds. So my older students have to say knees, nies, because they have to be able to figure out both sounds of the common sounds. Which one is it in this word? Right. So, and then I do go through these, you know, when I'm teaching these. That's not a good example. So my very beginnings, I don't have the CE and the GE, and I'll go through the E makes the U say U, and the E makes the A say A, and whatever, and we'll practice it this way, and we'll practice putting the sounds together. So I have this, and you will have this. And I will also link in the other site that has just come out that has professionally done this, although it doesn't hide sounds, but it looks pretty. But the key is that we want to give them the skill of putting sounds together, and we want it to happen smoothly with automaticity so that they're not having to think about it. That part makes sense. And the use of nonsense words allows me to assess, are they really putting sounds together, or was that just something that they memorized? Because they have to be able to put sounds together. Here's the other thing that I'm seeing is that when students have those lists of words, like that first grade word, it had call, fall, want, whatever, and a couple of silent E words. When we focus so much on the individual word, students forget that content and skill transfers across to other words. So they learn to read call and fall, but are they going to read stall? Or are they not going to read stall? So we have to give them the content to know that A often says We have to give them the content to know that we all. And then we have to give them the skill in putting those sounds together. So we think, you know, like Wonders, it has phonics and it does cover most of the rules. But if we limit it to the words that they have, it's often so short-sighted that they don't transfer that skill. So it's like they've put all their power into learning those words for their spelling test or whatever. And then we see the kids in third grade that tell me, well, I know that E makes the A say A, but can't read the word mistake. But they did, because they didn't know that the E made A say A. In other words, they only knew it worked for those few words. So the process of using this randomizing and not just focusing on those few words that are on your spelling test allows for better transfer for later grades. That makes sense? Okay. So I know that was really fast and none of you got a chance to practice it, but are there any questions now? And this file is in that shared drive or the drive that is shared with all of you. Sorry, it's not a shared drive, that I linked up earlier in the chat. So it's in there and you all have access to it, and I can show anyone how to change it at another time to modify it for your kids, how to fix it. Because if you've only introduced these few sounds, those are the only sounds you're going to practice blending together until you've introduced more, right? So I will do that. But are there any questions or comments, reflections? Nothing?
Emily, so you know how you mentioned how word families aren't really suggested because then they'll like read the ending and then they'll go back and it's not in like a sequence. Is that something similar with like rhyming words? And
so if if you're being taught to read by cat, fat, sat, rat, mat, fat, hat, and if it introduces it with, you know, the big AT, and then this part changes all the time, we are training the brain to look towards the back. But if that's what you have to work with, and if you cover the T and get them to put together the rat, hat, mat. So sometimes we have to work with the curriculum that we have, but remembering that the goal is to get them to blend sounds in sequence and to be able to put them together.
Yeah.
Emily, that resource, I don't see it in the folder because there's no sheets in there. There's only,
shoot.
There's, you know, because you just have to look for that Google Sheet icon and there's no sheets in there. The one, the file, right? The PD resources, it's not in there.
The one that says the docs Google, oh no, wait, where is it? This drive? Let me see. I will put it in there now.
Okay.
But please make your own copy.
Yeah.
And I actually have a thing where it forces you to make a copy, but and of course my drive is just being really super slow today. I don't know what's going on with Google.
So for our kindergartners, would we start with something like that? Because we're like right now we are using the Jamboard. I mean, because in Wonders, they actually have them do it with sounds, but I noticed that's hard for them if they don't see anything. A lot of them are not at that place yet, so they have to see the letters. I mean, of course, we're only doing CBC, but and even for some, that's hard. And I didn't start with the beginning like MA instead of, I started with A, because we only had the vowel A. I mean, that's all we learned in first quarter. That was the only vowel. So I started with
if you start with,
I started with am or, you know, at. Oh, in the beginning was am because that's the first letter they learned was M and then A. And then adding on to whatever, like the SAM and the PAM.
But they are indicating for us to stretch out that vowel. So this says, you know how you say the first two? It does say ah, and then you know how you say you drop that last letter? So they are teaching us to stretch it, the first two, ah, and then drop that last consonant.
Well, what I'm saying is I usually start with AM and then I'll say I'm adding a beginning sound or I'm changing the ending sound. And I'm doing that, you know, the taking away, like changing the beginning, changing the end. But the way you're doing it is I should start with TA first and then drop the end. But I always started with like the AM and the...
So at your very beginning level, I would start with too. And then change it to at.
Yeah.
And then change it to, you know, once you do introduce the I, change it to it.
Okay. I mean, I guess because in the beginning we had so limited on the number of letters that we had. Like in the beginning, we didn't even have T till just recently. We only had the M and the
S.
Yeah, and then a lot of the books, right, were a lot of the the books that they use had the word am in it. So that's kind of why we started with am.
Right. So, but the point is let's not memorize am and then make it cam, can, fan, van. But once you are doing 3 letters, start here and unitize it.
Yeah.
Going from this way, right?
Yeah.
So rather than memorizing this. And still they say, you know, for the very, very early readers, it is a fast way to get 4-year-olds to read. But you know, my goal is not a fast way to get the 4-year-olds to read. My goal is to help them become successful, you know, 3rd graders, 8th graders, adults, right? So even though, yes, that is right, there are programs that they use to say, oh, get your 3-year-old to read, you know, get your whatever. So memorizing those families can be used, and you can get a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old to read that way. But long term, if it's a child that needs that explicit instruction, you're better off training them from the beginning to go left to right and
so
not memorize it.
I didn't do it by word families, but I guess I kind of changed beginning. I changed beginning and end. So should I just stay?
Yeah, no, do that. Go for that. That's all you have. That's what you work with.
I mean, it was literally so little letters. It was like 5 letters. In the beginning was only like 3 letters, and that's all we could change, right? Like, so I changed like everything, but I think I mean, hopefully we get another vowel. Right now we only have A so far.
I's coming up. I.
Yeah, it's very limited.
Next. I is usually next in that.
Yes, I's coming up.
And then you can do more.
I know, it's like very limiting. Yeah, that was good. Lots of good ideas.
Okay.
And it's more meaningful now that we have kindergarten. You know, like last year you taught us this, and of course I had 2nd grade RTI, but because we're teaching babies how to read, right? Now we're making connections and we have questions, whereas before we're like, that, you know, but now it's all coming together, right? And I've never taught kindergarten. I mean, you know, so yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The learning curve is huge for many things, but it's wonderful. I love it.
Oh. So Kayleen, you've used this with some of your other students. Have you found, or have you used it?
Yeah, it definitely works. Like the things that you did say that they had trouble with was saying it individually, like cat the ta, you know, like with, you know, like it's hard for them to say a consonant without adding a vowel. And just going, like you said, just think about it and just start blending it. So what I would do is have their finger and then just keep saying it, and the next one, and keep saying it, and then like just stop right at the last sound. So that helps, you know.
Good.
And just making, because they forget too. Yeah, what did I say in the beginning? So just maybe take away that last sound and just redo the first 2 until they got it, then just push in the last sound. But yeah, just going in sequence really helps.
Good. So David Young came on Monday. You know David, Mel, from
Monowilly?
Yeah, because I had posted some of this stuff on a Facebook group that he also, so he had asked, and he was using my blending for it. He says, oh, I made one for some of my students. So
he's awesome. David's awesome, and he's on it.
Yeah. So he said, oh, let me know if you do anything else. So that's why I said, oh, you know, I'm going to do the same thing. He came on Monday, and he's
love it.
Yeah.
Yep. We're so fortunate to have you, Emily.
Oh,
you just really are. And you're so sharing, you know, you share everything and you break it down so it's easy and manageable. So thank you for being so willing to help us.
I'd like to say something. What helped, some of the kids don't hear the blend or even the letter sounds, but if they shut their ear and you say it in the other one, they can, and make them say it, they can actually hear themselves. We don't know if they got a hearing problem or they had tubes in their ears. So if you do this and you say it, you can actually hear the k, very soft, and they can hear it too.
Right.
So
right. And
I've been,
you see a lot of rooms that have those like PVC
I
phones,
see that.
and that does the same thing too. It's like, okay, really getting them to hear. We forget that when we hear things, we are hearing through our ears and also through the vibrations, the internal vibrations. So what we hear is our internal vibration, right? Like when you wear your headphones, does it sound weird to you? Because you're no longer hearing this, you're only hearing, right? And so getting them to accentuate that, the external hearing and not just the internal vibration. It helps. So, doing that with your ears or doing the thing with the phone, the PVC phones, the tubaloos or whatever they call it. They sell that.
This one is better.
Those things too.
Like this. I'm okay with it. Or I get a paper cup and I just cut the bottom off and I went like this to Ryder and go, hi. He thought it was cute. So
cute.
Yeah.
Cute.
But it's okay. So that does help. Thank you.
Anything else for today? Now, I put this in that ad. I'm building the Google site that I will share with everybody. And Google Sites is just not pretty to work with. It's like, I want this to be the same size. Why can't I get this box to be the same size as this box? It's the same things I'm putting into both. It's like, oh. But I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So I'm going to put the videos of all of our sessions plus the resources in there, and I will get it out soonish. And hopefully that'll be easier, because when I put the resources into the site, I will make it so it forces a copy on your end to make it easy. But yeah. Anything else? And I'm around, so if you have questions, if there's a way I can help, please. So the next 2 days, and who's coming over Thursday, Friday? Is we'll be talking more about older. Yay! 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 Okay, good. Okay, so we're gonna talk more about how all this applies to working with the older kids and give them the ability to decode and encode longer words, and also the relationship of morphology with the older kids. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank
we
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Emily. Good to see everybody. Hope you're enjoying your break.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bev, if you want to make a copy of my binder, you can get it.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Toodles.
Bye.